Everyone to our webinar for today. Thank you for joining us on this very interesting webinar about building management systems. We hope that you do find this valuable and learn something about how this can be a solution that can help you manage your own buildings and projects. I want to go over a few housekeeping items today before we turn it over to our slate of speakers that we have. I just want to ask that everyone to please keep your microphones on mute until the end of the presentations. This helps eliminate feedback and allows our speakers to focus and deliver their information and for everyone to be able to hear them. We will have a moderated Q&A session at the end of all the presentations. If you want to go ahead and put your question in the chat, go ahead and feel free to do that, and then we will answer those during that Q&A session. The workshop slides and recording will be posted to the Conserve North Texas website under News and Events under the Events Archive tab. You can follow that link below that's on the slide. We will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who registered with this information. So don't worry, you will get an email in your inbox with a link of where to access today's webinar information. And then lastly, I just wanted to ask everyone to consider donating the value of your time on today's webinar through in-kind match. I know many of you, when you registered, already selected yes or no. So thank you for those who did select yes. If you were unsure, so you selected no, what an in-kind match is, that just allows us to count the value of your time attending the webinar today as a match for our grant that funds this work, and as long as your time is not being paid for by federal hours or federal dollars. So that's just a short explanation about what that is. And speaking of grants, I do want to acknowledge our workshop sponsor. We are sponsored by the State Energy Conservation Office for this work on our Regional Energy Management Program. They fund things like this webinar and other workshops that we do. They provide technical assistance on a variety of energy management and energy efficiency projects and water efficiency, as well as renewable energy topics. So we're very grateful for their continued support of our regional energy management program. So a little bit about who we are, if you are not familiar with the COG or the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We are a regional planning agency that serves the North Texas local governments on a variety of topics. And our regional energy management program is an ongoing effort to identify energy management program needs, help increase awareness to the local government energy reporting requirements, and then also provide resources that can assist our local governments in their energy conservation efforts. And NCTCOG does partner with local governments and public K through 12 schools, public institutions of higher education, and state agencies across Texas to reduce utility costs and help maximize energy efficiencies. Here is our agenda at a glance for today. I did pop a link in the chat for the full agenda. If you have a chance to check that in the chat, I can also drop it in later if you would like. And with that, I will introduce our moderator for today's webinar, and then they will finish our introductions of the rest of our speakers. So I would like to introduce Catherine Calloway. Catherine is an advocate for resilient, equitable design. She works with Kirksey as an associate partner and director of sustainability and building performance for them. Her experience as an architect and community leader helps enhance Kirksey's leadership in high performance design and informs her role as their director of sustainability and building performance. She leads a team of specialists who help integrate sustainable design strategies across their portfolio. Her dedication to green building advocacy and advancing sustainable design in Texas and the industry has garnered her multiple awards, including the Young Architects Awards from AIA Houston, Texas Society of Architects, and the American Institute of Architects. She is a native Texan, deeply committed to encouraging thoughtful development and enabling healthy communities. And Catherine, the pleasure of introducing you was all mine, and I will turn it over to you to introduce the rest of our speakers.
Thank you so much, Krista. I'm excited to be here with everyone. So go on to the next speaker. I'd like to introduce you to Umair Sarani. He's an expert in guiding building owners and operators on energy optimization strategies. He's an innovator, technologist, and strategist, having driven transformative projects across industries, designing energy retrofit projects, and implementing city-scale digital twins, among others. Currently, Umair advises building operators on turnkey energy management solutions and energy tech startups on commercialization strategy, while also serving as a board member for SPEAR and the U.S. Prop Tech Council. Next, we have Greg Wellman. He is the managing partner for CMTA's Dallas, Texas office and is responsible for their national healthcare client development. Leveraging his nearly 30 years of experience in implementing high-performing facilities, Greg has a passion for servant leadership and solving complex challenges with his clients in healthcare and education. CMTA designs the most energy efficient and healthy buildings in the world with the data to back it up, and I've enjoyed working with them on several projects myself. Greg believes this approach to health and wellness and financial stewardship is a key way to impact patient care and student experiences in a positive way. Finally, we have Brandon Boyder. He's got over 30 years experience in public education with 22 years in the field of school facility construction and management. Brandon is passionate about sustainable practices rooted in the concepts of building science. Previously with Frisco ISD and Allen ISD, Brandon is now the Executive Director of Construction, Planning, and Growth for Denton ISD. His insights on school buildings are shaped by his knowledge in school facility operations, along with his experience as a certified teacher and coach. So I think the next slide would start our topic, our presentation here. Just to start to dive in, we have, studies show that the vast majority of US commercial buildings do not have a building management system. This signifies tremendous opportunities are available for owners to benefit from cost savings through energy efficiency and smarter operations. There's opportunities across all scales. So we'll hear about that today, whether you're managing a single system such as lighting, or gaining real-time feedback on multiple systems across multiple facilities on your campus. So today we'll hear about what a BMS is, how to determine what type is best for your facility, some of the best practices and implementations and challenges you may face, and the role of a BMS in a modern energy management strategy. So as a reminder, as Krista mentioned, please post your questions in the chat or wait and ask them during the Q&A portion after the presentation. And now I'll kick it over to Umair and Brandon to get us started.
Great. Catherine, quick audio check. All good? Awesome. So to put some numbers to the statement that Catherine made about, the vast majority of buildings not having a BMS system. There's a 2022 study done by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory that shows that 60% of over 50,000 square foot buildings in the US have a building automation or building management system. However, only 13% under 50,000 square feet don't. Right. So what is these, 60% of over 50K square foot buildings figured out that the smaller ones haven't? And a lot of it comes down to really it was a necessity because they had large complex systems like central plant that could really only be controlled by a building automation system without having to go to the central plant to make every little tweak there may be. So there was also a convenience factor. But then also there is the efficiency factor that played in, both on the energy side and on the operational side. But because so many small buildings sort of have these same problems and these same goals, has led to an influx of new brands getting into the market that are offering BMS out of the box or BMS light solution. And really, from a building operator's perspective, that in a way complicates matters a bit more. Previously, you may have had, half a dozen brands to pick from, which was much simpler. Now you have maybe 2 dozen. So what is the right one for you? We'll try to help demystify that and then share a bit of the benefits, and then we'll also share some real world studies that Brandon from Denton ISD is going to get into a bit later. So on the next slide, you'll see a bit about what is a building management system. So your building is an ecosystem with multiple components and processes: HVAC, lighting, air quality, water, you name it. And all of these need to work together to make the building operate like it should be, right? And that's essentially what a building management system is helping you do. It's putting it into a centralized user interface that your building operator has. And with that, you could program these systems to operate in a way that helps you optimize for multiple things. Optimize for cost reduction, optimize for energy efficiency, optimize for asset lifespan. And the more cohesively these work together, the more you're going to be able to optimize all those different parameters that I just spoke about. And as mentioned, there's now so many brands of the different types of BMS systems out there. How we'll sort of classify that for the sake of this presentation and communication is there's BMS Lite, which is essentially, let's say you have a centralized control for your air conditioning and heating equipment, and maybe your lighting and air quality as well. You can monitor and control the systems that control those various elements. And then you have more standard BMS or legacy BMS, where it's slightly larger building. You want to control more than just HVAC, air quality, water, lighting. You also want to control, fire and life safety. Maybe have some automation built in, for demand-based scheduling or shutdown procedures and things along those lines. So that will be the standard BMS bucket. And then we walk into advanced building automation system, where you have a fully automated building, right? And now building automation really is a subset of a building management system for the sake of this presentation. And also energy management is this analytics layer that tells you how are your different energy consuming components performing, to give you the insights on where to make the right tweaks in order to optimize for your energy consumption. Okay, so those are the different buckets we're going to use to communicate various things moving forward. But essentially, a BMS is a software interface that is helping you control the components and the processes in your building. Greg, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Yeah.
Yes, sir. I was going to add one thing. I think the key word here is management. When we say building management, you are managing something. And so if you aren't managing it, then you probably aren't using it. And so we're going to show you a little bit later about the various, scales of this. But I think that key word I want you to think about is management. When I started in this business, there were thermostats on the wall, and, that's pretty much all we were concerned about. We still flipped off things with light switches. And now all of that can be super automated. You can control it from an app on your phone. But if you aren't doing anything to manage that, we start to question, one challenge could be, why do I have it? And so be thinking about that. The key term here, I think, is management. Back to you, Amir.
Beautiful, beautiful. So on the next slide, you're going to see a very high level system architecture of how a BMS comes together. Now, don't want you to get overwhelmed by this. This is not meant to, bog you down into the nitty gritty, really, but just to give you a high level overview of how this stuff works, right? So you have your components like HVAC system, like the pumps and valves, and then you have some fans and dampers and things along those lines, right? All of them need to be working in some sequence in order to have proper operations, right? So what a BMS essentially is doing is taking all those different components, either communicating equipment or, for lack of a better term, dumb equipment, and then using some sensors, they may be wireless, they may be wired, to integrate into your centralized building management system to give you insights into how they're operating, but then also making the necessary tweaks to meet your goals, right? So how you implement this, what are the best practices and things like that, Brandon is going to get into that a bit later, but that's essentially how this system is coming together. You got your equipment layer, you got your sensors, and you got your software. And the more cohesively they're integrated, the more points you have, the more control you have. So let me pause there for a second. Greg, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things here historically, and I worked for a firm where we made a lot of money, controlling all of this stuff. And Brandon's smiling because he knows how this works. In proprietary systems where you're locked into one vendor. Well, all that has changed, over the past, decade or plus, where now you don't, as an owner, as a steward of multiple assets, you don't have to have that anymore. Many vendors, many different layers, many different people can work on things now. And so I don't want anyone on this call or listening in the future to think I've got to get locked in, because you don't, because Amir will show you there's a journey here that can be taken. And I just wanted to point out that now it's more what we call open protocol. And so that gives you a lot more options, as an owner.
Yeah, great point. So on the next slide is that journey that Greg mentioned. So not every building is created equal, and even buildings of the same size may not be created equal, right? So the best solution for your building is highly based on your goals and the type of facility you have, right? And also where you are today in that journey and how far that goal may be in the future. Right? So you may have a building that just has thermostats and there is no centralized system to speak of. And they may be, network thermostats, they may be smart programmable thermostats, or they may be none of those, right? And then that's sort of the T=0 point. From there to get to some centralized control, let's say BMS Lite, is a little leap, right? There's going to be some integration required either through wireless sensors or wired sensors, right? But then it's going to give you some of that centralized control, and maybe that's just for your HVAC system and maybe your lighting as well, right? Now from there, it's a bit of a leap to go to a fully centralized legacy standard BMS system. You may have more wired sensors in there along with some wireless as well. That implementation gets a bit more complex, right? And there may be more sequence of operations type of work that needs to get programmed in there. And then from there, it's about an equivalent leap from BMS Lite to a standard BMS, as it is from a standard BMS to a fully automated advanced building automation system, where now all your sequence of operations is basically automated, right? However, at this point, you might still be a bit reactive. When something happens, something else happens or something gets triggered, right? And then it's a bit of a leap from going from that to, I would say, the pinnacle of building operations is your building becoming a living, breathing ecosystem that is a self-improving feedback loop. And you have fault detection and diagnostics built in that are telling you things that are about to go wrong before they go wrong, so you can address that rather than have downtime and be running around with your hair on fire. And then CCX, which is basically short for continuous commissioning, where you're iterating, or your system is iterating and constantly making the tweaks necessary to continue to optimize your operations and your energy spend and your asset lifespan. So again, this is sort of the journey from less complex to highly complex. Once you start thinking about, maybe a portfolio or a building in your portfolio or a building you may be familiar with, where it may be on this journey, and sort of think from that frame of reference moving forward. And I think that would be pretty insightful for you all moving forward. Greg,
And I think,
anything? Yeah.
yeah, I think stewardship is the key here. I think, my client's on this call and he often challenges me around, don't have me spending more money than I need to, right? And so depending on what you need, you got to establish your goals, like Amir said up front, and just be a good steward. If you're a data center world, maybe you need everything on the far right. If you're a school educating kids and you're concerned about a good, clean, healthy learning environment with good temperature control, good humidity, good air quality, maybe you're somewhere in the middle. And so I think it depends on what your goals are, and then just be a good steward of your finances, and that'll determine kind of what you might need on this journey.
It's almost like you're reading my mind, Greg. So on the next slide, we've tried to, in a way, concisely present, and again, this is general, not all buildings are created equal, but just as a way to simplify the different buckets your building may fall in. Let's say your goals are anything from reliability to comfort, energy efficiency, asset optimization, and or internal reporting. If you're a small building, let's say a library or a police station, more often than not, a BMS light may be more than sufficient for you to meet your goals. If you're looking at asset optimization, maybe you then look at a legacy or standard BMS system because that can get a bit more involved. If you're looking at a medium-sized building like schools, administrative buildings, courthouses, city halls, more often than not, standard BMS is probably a way to go. And more than likely, that building is going to be part of several buildings that are being controlled by a building automation system or a building management system. But if you're just looking at comfort and occupant experience and maybe just doing some reporting on energy parameters, then a BMS light, perhaps with a analytics layer, is all you may need, right? And now if you're getting into large, complex buildings like data centers, like universities, like hospitals, like arenas, having an advanced building automation system is probably the better way to go, unless, again, you're just looking at a reporting function with some energy analytics built in. But yeah, so very important to figure out what is the right solution for you, so you start looking into the right field of view, because it gets really overwhelming and confusing if your field of view is too wide. Greg, what would you have to add to that?
I think you covered it all. I'm gonna punt it to my guy Brandon. I'm the young guy on the call at 54, but he's younger than me at 44. So we're gonna go with that, B. Have you come off mute? You take it from here, sir.
All right. So I guess I'm the real world guy. They're all smarter than me, but I'm the guy that's in the trenches. Just a little bit about benefits of management systems. And, when I started putting this list together, these aren't probably in your order, may be different than mine. I think we all have different challenges. But we all are trying to be the best steward of money, and trying to stretch the dollar as much as we can, especially in my world. I'm in the K through 12 education space. So we are always looking to reduce costs. I put some asterisks there because that might not be your number one goal. Number two, for us, we're trying to gain some central control of our building systems and thus get better control. I think Amir showed you earlier that, you can have control with thermostats, but we're trying to gain some central control, thus to be able to do the other things, reduce the cost, as well as some other things. Amir pointed it out, but 40 to 80% of your building's energy usage can be at your control, at your fingertips. You can gain optimization of those things by putting in a building management system. And then number 4 I put down is the effective monitoring and targeting of energy consumption. And I should say the efficient monitoring of that. It also gives you the ability to have effective response. We use our EMS system when we are having a problem in a classroom or a space. It's not cooling. We get hot calls. We get a work order. The first thing we do is we open up our EMS, look at that unit, see what it's doing, and try to analyze things before we travel. My district is a district that's 186 square miles. So the more analyzation that we can do before sending someone 30 minutes down the road to go work on something, the more effective we're going to be when we are actually trying to fix those things. A benefit of having building management systems and taking control of things is improved indoor air quality. Some of that's done by you managing outdoor air for us, meeting ASHRAE, managing the outdoor air quality, or the outdoor air that we're pumping into the building is a huge factor in the indoor air quality. So that gives us immediate management of those things. But the bigger thing for me, I'm a data geek, and so it gives me the storage of historical data so that we can go back and look at trending on air systems, what the unit was doing. It lets us look at those things to talk to Greg, talk to our engineers about things that we may need to do or things that we say aren't working right in our facilities, and then gives us the data to show them. And we try to share that data with them as well so that they can see that. Just as we talked about earlier about commissioning, this kind of gets you that ongoing commissioning of your facilities by having that data. Another thing, local control inside set parameters. And what I mean by that is I'm a big believer that teachers and educators have a little bit of control of facilities. So we put thermostats in our buildings and we give the teachers or who have the occupants some ability to control up and down. That does a couple things for me. What I found is it's going to reduce my hot and cold calls at that particular campus by about 30%. When a person feels like they can go turn the air up and down and have a little bit of control on there, it automatically reduces them putting in a work order for that they are in an uninhabitable space. It's hot or cold. So we started installing thermostats that do have that ability to go up and down rather than just a sensor and that being set from the top with no ability for the participant to have any input. The last thing I think that helps all of that, our building management systems that we use, they do employ optimized start of the facility. So our building, they are getting smarter. They know when to turn the units on and turn them off. We set those parameters. We set when we want the temperature to be X, and so they know by the outdoor air temperature when to come on. What does that do for me? Optimizes my building, makes it better for the occupants, hopefully reduces my energy cost as well for that facility. So those aren't in really any big order, but those are the benefits that I see from an end user and from implementing systems in schools, in our educational buildings for the occupants. And we can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the challenges. Some of the challenges obviously are initial cost. BMS systems, EMS systems, those two get used interchangeably. They do cost. And I've been at 3 districts in the last 20 years, and one of those districts had already locked into an EMS system. So when you lock into those, sometimes in Greg's days, I'd go back to, I know where Greg worked before, that was the whole idea with some of those BMS systems. They get you locked into that, and now you've got to stay with that system for the life of the building or of the EMS system. And so one thing that is good nowadays that we see is you can layer your BMS systems. And so I'll give you a little example of that. At my district where I'm at, we layer, we have a top layer that, and I'm not condoning or pushing this layer, but we have a tritium layer up on top, and that tritium is actually the layer that we interact with, that we go in there and we see all the units, see what's going on in our buildings. But below that, at the actual building layer, we can have any control system there is. It kind of layers up so that our top layer can communicate down. What does that do for me? It kind of allows the initial cost of implementing systems and changing systems to be softened some. I don't have to have a tie into one system for the life. I can go to a different system. And speaking of that, I have about 3 different systems in my buildings, but we all still use that top layer. So nobody that is actually at using that system knows that there's a different control at the school or at the building because of that top layer being the same. Another challenge, implementation of usage of it. It's real easy to put an EMS system in, and I'll give you an example. Who are you going to give access to the system, and how do you manage that access? I will tell you that I've been in districts or places that every person that works on the system or HVAC tech has the exact same login. And what you find is they all go in there and they lower set points. They forget to move set points up. And all of a sudden, your system is no longer saving you money because every point has been overridden. So when I talk about challenges, it's the access level that you're giving to people who can change systems, who can modify systems. Do they have the ability to modify set points and then would just stay like that indefinitely? Do they automatically go back? So the implementation of who has the ability and maybe the access, how you grant access is really important if you want that system to really save you money and to help you in controlling those things in the building. That kind of ties into the last one, is train staff to manage or monitor it. It's all great that if you put these systems in, but then if you don't use them, they really become a burden, not really helping. And so I think it's when you get ready to put EMS or BMS in your building, you've got to come up with a plan on how are we managing it. Is there going to be somebody monitoring this? Is it an energy manager? Is it an HVAC guy? How are you going to monitor? How are you going to give access? What are you going to allow to be modified? And things like that. So just from my level, those are the initial. I think we'll go into deeper detail on all those through Q&A, but those are kind of the challenges and benefits that we see, or I see, in my neighborhood as we implemented those things.
Thank you guys so much. I think we're ready to jump into our Q&A time now that we've had this great overview of building management systems and some of the challenges and opportunities. I'd like to start with the question that was in the chat and also encourage other attendees, if you have another question, please enter it in the chat, or you can unmute after the next question and ask it directly. So the question in the chat is about, why do we see EMIS systems offered as a separate platform? What's stopping BMS providers from incorporating the features found within EMIS systems? For example, demand response, fault detection and diagnostics, and performance data tracking. So I'm not sure who can kick this one off, but I think also starting with maybe what's the distinction between EMIS and BMS? Well, got it, Greg?
Amir, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can certainly take it. I think that
I'll add something.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that I in EMIS, I don't know if that's a typo or if that it stands for something else, but I think EMS is referring to energy management system. Maybe it's information system, right? So, the distinction between the two, the energy management, the way I am seeing it, or I see it, is it's a layer that adds additional insights to your building management system. Now, you can have an EMS without a BMS, and you can have a BMS without an EMS. The best option, I think, especially if your goal is energy optimization, is to have the two work together. Now, why are they offered as separate platforms? I think this question asker is correct. A lot of them are offered as separate platforms, or at least separate modules within a certain brand. And I think a lot of that is probably market forces, right? Like these are commercial enterprises. And I was just speaking to an EMS platform provider not long ago. And I asked this question, hey, why are you just offering insights? Why aren't you just building a control component to it as well? And he's like, we don't want to play in that. That's too complex. We'll just let the people that are already doing that offer it, and we'll just find a way to integrate it. Now, there are some that have found a way to integrate it and then offer it as a solution. But, I think, again, the market forces, figuring out your lane is probably the biggest reason that I've seen for the delineation between the two in terms of how they're offered.
Yeah, I would add, as a former employee of a company that, sort of did both, it was really the same thing, and it was really how you marketed it. And I'm gonna punt to Brandon on this one, but let me tee this up. Brandon at Denton ISD, you can call it building automation, building management, or energy management. Okay, here's the key. He has a BMS system. He has a physical building management system. He's got this layer. He's got these other vendors down below. And he could just do that as a client and do nothing with that information. It could be, like he said, all about service calls. It could be about temperature control for his classrooms, but he may not care about energy. When I started up in the Northeast, energy was super expensive. When I first came to Texas, many, many years ago, everybody's like, don't come down here talking about energy management systems. We get 3 cents a kilowatt. It's so cheap. You have no value. Well, now that 3 cents a kilowatt is 16, 17, 20 cents a kilowatt. And everybody's like, hey, can you help me? It's all about what you're doing with the data. Again, you could take BMS and just do different things with it. But if you're concerned about energy, what Brandon has done is taken that information he now has, validating that through his utility bill costs. He and I calculate his EUIs, energy use intensities, every month, because, and now I'm speaking for him. I feel like I'm talking too much.
Keep going.
But in his, what he's curious about is, as he drives down his energy costs, he's driving down that cost of operations, which then that's more money back in the classroom for him. For you, it may be something different, but he's trying to be a good steward and put more money back in that classroom. So he is saying, I'm taking my BMS and now essentially turned it into an EMS, because he's doing something with that information and looking to validate that through driving down his owning and operating costs. Brandon, you go, man.
No, I think you took the words out of my mouth. I would say that the data's there. The points are there. Honestly, you just got to gather it. And the systems they can help you gather that data, or you can offload them into another system to gather that data. But for the most part, most EMS systems have the ability to give you, or the most BMS systems have the ability to give you the EMS data that you need. Especially for me, at least, I build new construction stuff and do renovation. New energy code has mandated some of the requirements that we have to do with energy management. So Greg's right. We have that data. I won't say that necessarily that we have always used that data very well, but we're trying to be better stewards of gathering that data and figuring out what can we do to make our buildings the best, most energy efficient, low cost buildings they can be. So I think, to me, it's about the data's there. How do I get it and use it? So again, where do I start? Well, I think you start by, hey, here's my data. I've got a point on my meter. I'm pulling it now. I see what I'm using there. Now I compare it to other buildings of comparable size, things like that. Like Greg said, I use Greg and them as a resource all the time. I'm calling and saying, hey, let's look at this data. Let's talk through this. So again, I don't know if that answers it all the way, but I believe that both, you said EMS and BMS, to me, they are interchangeable. I do get the difference there. I think that you can get the data from both of them to do what you need to do.
Yeah, I think safe to say Brandon is pretty far along that complexity journey, right? Where he has found a way to integrate the two, BMS and EMS. To sort of add to something you said about where to start, and the good place to start is with data. I think that's where the EMS only providers in the marketplace, I think that's the market they're trying to go after. Those that are not even collecting that data, they're not even worried about the BMS component of it. Hey, let's just give you the data and then you figure out what you're going to do later on. And eventually that may turn into an integration like Brandon is talking about. Hopefully sooner than later, but TBD on that.
Thank you. Richard, if you have any follow-up question, feel free to ask that. Or does anyone else in the audience have a question? Well, I've got another one. Brandon had mentioned the initial cost of implementation, and I've heard a lot today about managing your budgets and being a good steward of your finances. So we know there's going to be some upfront costs if you don't have this equipment or connectivity in your building yet, and training the staff as well. So how does an owner predict the payback and long-term benefits to justify those upfront costs? Do you have insight on that?
That's a good one. Ooh, it's like, is this like Stop the Presenter? So Brandon, I think from an owner's standpoint, I mean, I think it's going to come down to what, the goals and what parameters you're going to measure this by. You have yours being a K-12, school district. What are some of your thoughts there from a justification standpoint?
That's a tricky question. I'm in a luxury seat here in a sense that I have many facilities. So it's great that I can take a facility that doesn't have something, and then I have a facility that has something, and I get to compare those. A lot of people aren't in that seat where you get to compare that. You can do the math on if you don't have anything and units are running 24/7. I mean, it does get the equation it has a lot of variables in it. I would say that you can also just probably get people like Greg that are a lot smarter than me to come in and say, what is the expected energy savings when I do start controlling systems? And they can do that as well. And you can do that by looking at your bill and pulling your kilowatt hours and knowing what units you have. And it is a pretty big formula. I'm pretty lucky that I get to look at things, and I do have data from my years of experience in this from other districts that I can show, hey, if you do this, here's the potential savings. So, Greg, I don't know that I have a great answer to say, here's how you predict it. I think it's a math formula, and you look at kilowatt hours and everything else. But I'll let y'all take the rest of that.
Yeah, I would just add, I think Mayor might want to jump in here, but we do have CBECs, commercial building energy wait, let me get that acronym right. Commercial Buildings Energy Consumption Survey. So they've surveyed buildings, over the years, and they can tell you for a school, it should be this, for a hospital, it should be that, for a police station, it should look like this. And so they have these benchmarks essentially. And so that's a great place to start, to say, okay, where is my building? Where am I as compared to my peer buildings? And that's a great place to start. We love to look at EUI, which is energy use intensity, which essentially normalizes everything. You take 12 months utility bills. You say, how much energy does that building use per square foot per year? For example, in the state of Texas, just because I have this memorized, the average EUI for school building is in that 65 range. Brandon, we've got schools with Brandon in the teens. And so he is, killing it, if I could say it that way, from energy conservation, perspective. Your average healthcare facility around the country is like 250 EUI. Healthcare facilities are energy hogs. We're doing buildings in the hundreds. And so it's less than, half. So CBEX gives you all that data to say, okay, let's start with my benchmarks. Where am I? And then I think that gives you a real good, then look and then say, what are my opportunities? And we're all about data. We're data geeks, kind of like Brandon. I'm an engineer. And you just follow the data. We know the data teaches us 45% in HVAC, for example. Another 10% lighting, another 30%, 25% in kitchens. I'm talking K-12 in this particular case. So you just follow the data, and that tells you where you can focus. And that would take some analysis. But I would start with CBEX, get my benchmarks on my building type, and then that tells you, kind of what your opportunity is. From there, you can really calculate an ROI based on cost of implementation, and that becomes pretty easy to do.
Yeah, benchmarking is a superpower, especially if you got high-performing buildings in your region, because otherwise you're just benchmarking against low performers, right? which probably could hurt. But the moment I heard that question, I kind of got hung up on the term payback, and I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts on this as well, all three of you. Is that even a parameter worth using compared to ROI or IRR and NPV, which in business school I remember my finance professor emphasizing, if a project is positive NPV, you should say yes, right? But then so much of it goes down to the calculation. It is very easy to calculate a simple ROI or a simple payback, but that doesn't mean it's telling you the full story, right? The right calculation, in my opinion, are ones that take into account total cost of ownership over some elongated time horizon, right? Things are what they are today, but they may or may not be 5 years from now, right? Insurance costs, are you taking those into account? Are you taking into account asset lifespan? If you don't have a BMS and you're just patching things together, is your HVAC system going to run 5 years shorter because of all of that, right? This is all data that's out there. It just takes a bit, of careful diligence to be able to come up with the right calculation. And I think I can confidently say in most of those cases, especially for mid to large buildings and even small mid buildings, like it's going to have a positive NPV over 15, 20 years. Like, would you guys agree?
I don't even think it's that long. I mean, but I do think the question would be, depends on how bad the building's operating. To Brandon's point, if you got a building that has nothing and you go implement a BMS, you're going to see some incredible returns. But if you got a building that's pretty good, because to the point, energy codes have gotten better. And while you may not have had commissioning, you may not have this super duper system in there. Yeah, you got controllable thermostats. You're turning stuff on and off. Well, you might not be that bad. You can go another 20, 30% better, but maybe it's not 70% better when you're really, really bad to start. Brandon, I'm curious, any of your kind of real world examples, just from you've been on different journeys at different districts, and kind of what your thoughts are there.
I think, Greg, you said it's tough to lay my fingers on, because I have been in places. My very first district, I did implement the very first EMS BMS system. We had tied everything back to a local thermostat in a closet, and we were still turning every unit on and off. So we still had some level of controllability. But most of the time when I'm changing complete systems. And so I could definitely speak on what is the benefit when you go from X system to Y system, because I have that data in my hands. But I've been in a luxury that we've always had some type of EMS. We haven't always used it, or BMS. We haven't always used it to look at energy. I think we've really started diving into that. As in the education world, M&O dollars are tough to come by. So as Greg said, any dollars that I can save on the M&O side, I can put back in the classroom, help pay for salaries and all of that stuff. So it's become more important for us to manage energy. But as Umair said, it's also really important for us to be efficient in managing units and finding, before we, like I said, drive 30 minutes to a unit, that we can analyze what's going on with that unit. We can look, is the compressor coming on? What's the supply temp? We can kind of have an idea before we go out there. So there's other levels, as we said, of payback there. It also becomes a payback in analyzing stuff, so your people's hours are also used more efficiently. So there's different levels of payback by using the system properly. Now, look, I know a lot of places that have them, and when they get a hot call, they just go in there and they lower the set point 1 degree, and that's where I say that sometimes they become energy killers too, because you go in there and people are allowed to drive their set points down to 67 degrees and they've overridden it. It's running 24 hours a day. That can cause some problems. So managing the system is a must, in my opinion, if you still want to use it to say we're becoming energy efficient, or just efficient. I shouldn't even say energy, that we're using the system efficiently.
I was going to follow up with that as well. We've been focusing on the energy management benefits, energy efficiency specifically, and that is a huge part of what the BMS can help with. But Brandon, you also mentioned earlier indoor air quality feedback, and on the diagrams earlier that mentioned water systems. I'm curious what other kind of ripple effects across other areas of the building have been impacted. So
Greg can speak on this too. I am a big believer that we do indoor air quality sensors in schools, so that we can have instantaneous feedback of how our area is in the school. We all know that the better the air quality, hey, the better educating of kids it's going to happen in that facility. So we do indoor air quality sensors. We have humidity sensors in all the rooms so that we can really look, dive down to what the air quality is. We also at our level on our EMS BMS system, we monitor water flow, and the reason we do that, it's not really just to manage how much water we're using. It's also to know if there's a problem. If it's after hours and we have a high flow, it's to give us an early alerting that, hey, we have an issue there. We probably have a water leak, a busted pipe or something, and we can 2 o'clock in the morning, we get an alert. It sends us an alert. We can dispatch somebody out there to go see what's going on. So it comes with some other benefits to help me manage facilities in a better method. As Greg said, we're not waiting on the month to month bill to come in and go, oh man, we used more energy this month than we did last year. We can actually look at the energy usage to manage that on a daily basis, all the way down to 10-minute, 15-minute increment, that we're grabbing that data from the meters, and we can use that to analyze things. So the payback to me is not just money, it's also management of facilities, management of your assets, management, and your asset meaning your employees as well.
Brandon, can you speak to, you turned me on to the aware sensors you're using. I remember sitting with you, you pulled your app up, it was measuring VOCs. Talk about that and kind of what led you, because that evolved.
Yep.
You evolved there, right? And then, you and I talked about our more recent strategy with you in the last 3 years. I don't want to get too geeked out on what we did on strategy, but how your air quality has improved, from outdoor air management and things of that nature.
Yeah, if we go back to, let's talk about the bad word here, COVID. Especially in education, when we finally got kids back into the classrooms, outdoor air and indoor air quality was, you couldn't go a day without talking about that 25 times. And so, we had a lot of parents, rightfully so, worried about, do the schools have great indoor air? And so, honestly, I was getting some requests for indoor air quality tests quite often. And when we would do those. And so my thinking was, why don't we start putting sensors in schools so that we have that at our fingertip and then we can give that data to people immediately? So we chose to find a sensor to put in school, and we put several of them throughout the school. We don't put one in every room, but we put one, I think in a 100,000 square foot building, we put about 7 of those spaced throughout the facility. And so that we have some instantaneous data that we can pull up, we can look at VOCs, we can look at all of the things that contribute, humidity, temperature, all of those things that contribute to poor indoor air quality. And we can monitor that. Now, Greg, I will tell you that I had a way of doing things per se that I knew worked. Greg, I've been working with Greg now for going on 3 years, I think, actually 3 years. Greg, his engineering firm was brought to me by an architect, and we had never really separated our outside air from our units. And so Greg brought to me a plan to use DOAS and lower we're a geothermal school district, geothermal heat pump. Not that I'm pushing that, but I'm just saying that Greg brought to me a different idea, and that idea of separation. Honestly, we see that we've collected the data and the difference of doing it the way that they recommended, and we see that it helped our indoor air, it helped our occupants. The building has a better temperature, humidity, and all that. So, but again, it goes back to that data. It goes back to having a system that can provide you data to let you make informed decisions, and then be able to back up that it was a good decision for your facility. Sometimes that data is going to tell you it's a bad decision, and then you can get away from that decision rather than perpetually doing that over and over and over again. Again, let the data drive you to where you need to get.
So Brandon, you're saying don't doctor the data. Good advice. But I want to pull on a thread about indoor air quality. COVID, yes, shed a lot of light onto that. But at the same time, there's been studies even pre-COVID that show good air quality's effects on cognition and performance, especially on classrooms. And now that you've had the opportunity to put sensors and have data on indoor air quality, and you've seen improvements in air quality, have you been able to tie that to any of those other parameters like performance, like cognition, like grades, like attendance and things along those lines by chance? I'm just really curious. Yeah.
That's a great question there. I would say that I don't know that we are far along yet, far enough along that I have that data that I can put them together. That is some data that I can start putting together. But I will also say that, we always looked at CO2 in classrooms, and forever CO2 was the driver of what indoor air quality was. I mean, we said, hey, if it was high CO2, then we had bad indoor air quality, which is true. I'm not disputing that. But there's also other factors, that VOCs, and other things that go, humidity. I mean, all of those things that also affect indoor air quality. So while we had always looked at CO2, putting the other ones in there allowed us a little bit more insight into what the true air quality was for the other things that contribute to that. Those are definitely a linear. When VOCs go up or when CO2 goes up, the others typically go up as well. But I don't know that we have that data. We can start putting that data together. I will say, I know this is a different class or a different subject, but new facilities matter too. I mean, we see that too, that, most of those places that I'm doing that are new facilities. And when you put a student from a poor facility into a nicer facility, I will tell you right now, I do have that data. You see behaviors improve, you see responsibilities improve, all of those things. So I don't have the data that you're asking for, but I am a big believer in that data.
I would add one thing there though, Brandon. I've seen you be proactive with this data where, let's say, hey, somebody says, hey, you have sick building syndrome. And then you can pull up trend data that says, boom, 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 here's how we've been trending. Here we've been monitoring this data. And so you're able to head off, some of those things or dispute, some of those things. And so I think that's been, pretty beneficial for you in the past, would you say?
Yeah, I would say what that does for us, it gives us a precursor. It lets us, if we look at our data, if somebody says, hey, I'm getting sick in here, and I can look at my data, I'm like, hey, it looks like we do have an issue, then I'm going to go more testing. I'm immediately going to call indoor air quality and start doing some in-depth testing. If I look at my data and it's all shows that it's great indoor air quality, that also gives me data to show them and say, look, here it is. And I will tell you that we've had it before where somebody gets sick and they blame it on the building. And we give them the data and they go take it to their doctor and their doctor does tests and they had underlying issue that it wasn't the building. They had other things, and that happens. I don't think anybody's out there to try to get, but it's real easy to point to a place that you spend 12 hours a day and you're sick. You sometimes like to draw a straight line to that, and sometimes it's not there. So Greg, you're absolutely right that having that data at our fingertips tells us what the next step is, but also lets us be forward thinkers to show people how, well, we might not have an issue here. Here's our data. And we're not going to change that data. Here it is, if bad, good, or whatever. I'm a big believer in, hey, people all the time say my space is hot when really the issue is you have a humidity issue in the building. And so being able to monitor those things help you analyze what the problem is.
This has been really great. I think we're nearing our conclusion time here. So does anyone have any closing thoughts or any last words before we pass it back to Krista?
I am curious to hear from both Greg, Catherine, and Brandon on this. We all have to start somewhere, and that somewhere is very dependent on where you are today. So at the bare minimum, is there a recommendation on, hey, go collect this data or go look at this? Is there a starting point that you all would recommend?
I'll go first, and then I'm curious. I'll punt to Catherine since she's been moderating. um, my thing is goals. I start, you know, with goals. What are you trying to do? Maybe you're trying to solve a problem. Maybe you have a financial goal. Maybe you have a student performance goal. Maybe you have an energy code goal. It starts with the goals, and that starts to then shape the next decisions you make and where you might be on that journey. So for Omer, for me to answer that, it starts with goals because I'm a big believer. For example, I'll give you, somebody comes to me and says we have a problem or a decision we have to make. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the core values of our organization and say, does it fit within these core values? If it does, then we should probably work on that. If it doesn't, I'm gonna challenge that. Same thing with energy management and building management, all the things we're talking about. If you have a goal as an institution to lower and reduce owning and operating costs, I think we're telling you today, this is a vehicle to help you do that. If you don't, then you don't. So I think it just starts for me, it starts with goals, and that starts to inform, where you go next. Catherine, your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's our approach as well. Of identifying, what is important and what are you trying to achieve now in 5 years and 50 years with your building, or even longer. And what are you seeing now that is something you could address. And so I think honing in on those values and specific goals that you have will help cut through the many plethora of options as we've seen today. There are so many options and so many, different vendors, different types of equipment, different things you can gather data on. But starting with what are your top goals? What are you really trying to achieve first will help you take some bite-sized steps forward and narrow down where you can start.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't see any further questions in the chat, but so I think we'll hand it back to you, Krista.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of our speakers sharing their expertise and knowledge with us. I feel like this has been a really fascinating and informative conversation today. So thank you guys so much for all of your time that you've put into today's webinar. I'd like to share a couple of upcoming events and then some resources before we close out our time today. So the first is I wanted to share that the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource, otherwise known as SPEAR, is having their Industry Plus Policy Workshop down in Austin next month, the 18th through the 19th. And so this event does allow participants the ability to exchange success stories, explore cutting edge energy efficiency technologies, and discuss demand side strategies. They have session discussions with energy experts and leaders that will focus on some of the most pressing and timely energy items in our region, such as, the 2025 legislative session in Texas, about energy efficiency and what's next, and how demand response can help bridge the gap between energy efficiency and grid sustainability, as well as investing in workforce growth for a sustainable future in a changing energy landscape, and many other interesting topics. So that would be a great event to check out if you are able. And next, sort of related to our work on the Regional Energy Management Program, is our agency's sustainability-focused committee, the Regional Integration of Sustainability Efforts, or RISE Coalition. Their next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, October 29th. It will be held virtually on Microsoft Teams, so it'll be a great way to maybe just pop in and see what this group is about. You can visit their committee page to stay updated on meetings and learn more about the RISE Coalition on their program page. So we do, as an agency, host many events throughout the year and from one week to the next. So you can stay up to date with those by checking out the Environment and Development Department's events page, as well as DFW Clean Cities. They have a lot of wonderful events as well related to our energy management program. And then you can also sign up for our many of our email lists that will also, another way to stay informed. You can get notified as we start advertising those events. And so then I will move into our resources and funding that I would like to highlight as we close out. We do have the Conserve North Texas website that is really a sort of a warehouse of different information related to energy and water and fuel, and trying to kind of like break down some of those silos across those topics. And so you will be able to find, like, for instance, the recording and presentations for today's webinar on this website. So some resources that are on this website that I wanted to just kind of quickly highlight are, the guide to zero energy and zero energy ready K through 12 schools, as well as like the Better Buildings Accelerator. That's a wonderful program to kind of help you learn more about the demonstrable success of innovative energy efficiency practices, and in a way to help you accelerate investment in those areas at your entity. And then also our Go Solar Texas website, of course, has a lot of information related specifically to solar. So a couple of resources that our funders, NCTCOG has, I'll touch on a few of these in a little more depth in the next few slides, but they do have, technical assistance that they offer. They also have the Watt Watchers of Texas program that focuses on behavioral programs for schools and families. They do have a TEKS aligned STEM material available through them, as well as the local government energy reporting program, where they provide technical assistance for that state mandated energy efficiency and reporting. So I'll go over a few specific details or programs in more detail here. The preliminary energy assessments that are available through NCTCOG are a way to receive cost-effective resource energy efficiency measures that your entity can implement to help decrease your energy consumption at no cost to you. So this can help you guide the development of an energy management policy. It can help provide facility benchmarking and using the Energy Star portfolio manager. If you don't already have a way to benchmark, it can help recommend maintenance procedures, as well as developing energy or efficiency level guidelines for equipment purchases that you may be looking to make. And then there are technical, no-cost technical assistance. Again, no cost is the key word here. Through this program, NCTCOG contracts with engineering firms to help provide customized on-site energy-related services, ranging from basic consultations to feasibility studies. So eligible entities may be able to request assistance with either energy or water-related technical matters. And eligible entities would include public entities like municipalities, counties, or other special purpose districts, such as like a port or transit authority or an airport. And then the Texas Lone Star Revolving Fund, wanted to make sure I mentioned this one as well. It will be closing. The open enrollment will be closing here very soon, in about a week and a half, I suppose. So if you are interested in taking advantage of this, that window is closing. But this program helps finance projects that can reduce your energy, water, or utility costs. There is a simple payback period of just 15 years or less. The interest loan rate is 2.5% or 1.5% if you use ARA funds, but that does come with a little bit more reporting requirements. The maximum loan amount is $6 million per loan application for the state energy program funds. If you are seeking to use the ARA funds, the maximum is $8 million with a minimum of $3 million. And they are, for this cycle, allowing 2 loans or applications per entity. So you can find more information on NCTCOG's website for the Lone Star program. This is just another link. We're making sure that you have plenty of places to access the link for the Conserve North Texas website and our other resources here. Quick reminder, if you haven't already submitted a response to the in-kind, you can use your phone to scan that QR code and be taken straight to that SurveyMonkey, or you can click the link on the slide to fill that out. We just ask for the value of your time sitting on today's webinar to count as match for our grant program here that has helped funded today's webinar. And then also we would like to hear from you on what you thought about today's webinar, and if there are other topics you would like for us to cover in the future, and also if we can help connect you to CECO to take advantage of any of those programs that they have. If you would like to know more information, we can connect you directly with them. So participating in that survey helps us make that connection. Our couple of our partners that we work with, Adam Mueller with CECO and Sean Auckland at Spear, we just want to give a shout out to them for being great partners as always with our regional energy management program. If you have any questions specifically about our regional energy management program, you can reach out to myself, Krista Guzman. I realize now that I did not introduce myself at the outset of this webinar, or some of my colleagues, Corinne Buckley, Cassidy Campbell, and Savannah Nance. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have. And with that, I will close this out. I want to say one more thank you to all of our speakers for your time in presenting this material today. I really appreciate you. And also for everyone who hopped on and asked a question and shared your time with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.